think that now in the psychology of the next games to come, that's huge when you can start off like that if you're Misfits and B-Boy.
Yeah, I also think that it's not necessarily like B-Boy's gotten like a ton of flack thrown his way. I would say early on in the split, that was definitely true, but people just realized, hey, Misfits don't tend to play through that bottom lane. He's more of a role player. He'll sit down there in lane and show up and do his job in team fights, but it's not going to excite you. But even then, we heard other pro players speaking very highly of B-Boy, and the way he plays the game, so we knew he was good. It just wasn't like he wasn't the star on this team, so to come out and show that extra side is always going to be good when you are in the best of fives now.
I have to echo that sentiment. There is a class and a skill in terms of playing weak side and making sure you don't die to ganks. I think it was just on the aggressive point that the criticism was aimed towards Misfits as a whole. I think still this game didn't really prove us anything because it was Rogue that had the initiative. They had to snowball early. They didn't manage to do it, and the next draft could look completely different. So Misfits still playing through bottom, still unanswered because this game was very easy for them to execute. They showed a great level of skill in terms of, after they got that lead, they just snowballed very well, very confident around that Nashor. They looked completely in control after those kills on bottom, which is very, very positive, but the next draft could change everything and it could highlight the weaknesses or strengths of both teams.
Oh, you're covering all bases. Like, you can't flame me for saying that. You can't flame me for saying that. You can't flame me for saying that. But on the other hand, of course you are right. This is a best of 5 series. It never comes down to just one game, and it can definitely evolve. But I want to then look at Rogue from that point of view, which they will have to do as well. And you could narrow it down to it was just the execution errors in that bot lane and that top lane. If that doesn't happen, you have a completely different game, right? So what would you like to see Rogue do in game 2?
Well, the thing is, as you said, right, it could look completely different, and they could have executed on this, snowball through bot lane style composition. But that being said, I feel like some of the best things we saw from Rogue during the regular season was actually more scaling options, right? Like Larson on the Vladimir. This game is on Tristana, who can be strong in lane, but also scales very well. I actually prefer a Rogue style of team that is more focused on getting, into the later team fight stages, when the action is less driven by, a Thresh-driven bot side of the map to when it's actually driven by Finn on a Kled that roams through the top lane. So I think that there are some of those pocket picks that I would like to see them fall back on towards, because that's sort of the peak vision of Rogue in my mind.
For me, I think it's important that in the draft that teams manage to find balance. I think in this draft, it was so full-on early game with the Renekton, Taliyah, and then the Tristan in the mid lane, which was honestly the best pick out of the whole draft in my opinion. The Thresh Draven, very good matchup into Kalista Taric, but then even if they got that lead, how easy would it be to finish the game? We saw in the Mad Lions versus G2 series, where Mad Lions had this full-on early game composition. They were 5k gold ahead, a little slip up, and all of a sudden the composition that scales better and had some kind of balance in it won out the game. So I think it's all about finding balance, make sure that you have a basic plan for Rogue, maybe through mid lane into bottom, maybe finish playing something that scales a bit more heavily and is going to take care later parts in the game, making sure that every step of the game is covered. When you reach that mid to late game, what is your game plan? Because then again, if for some reason Rogue was ahead this game, maybe it would be too difficult to get through all of those tanks and get to Zoe. It's all about, making sure that you cover all bases.
And they seem to have something in mind, because Rogue have selected the blue side for game 2, so we'll see if there is a change up there. Their plan, however, it backfired in game 1, but we will see if Rogue can even up the series when we come back.
And welcome back to the LEC Playoffs Round 1. It's our final best of 5, Rogue versus Misfits, and Misfits took a commanding Game 1 if you're just now joining us. And Frostgren, this was, I think, safe to say unexpected.
And that's exactly what needed to happen if you're a Misfits fan. Rogue are a team that play incredibly well by the book. So to beat them, Misfits needed to take it off script. And having something like carrying through Bvoy or Bvoy picking up the Callista, even if Rogue did expect it and thought that Hansama's Draven could counter it, is exactly the wrench thrown in Rogue's plan that Misfits needed to get an edge in this matchup, which a lot of people have Rogue favored in.
And now we have to see what the adaptation is, right? Because now we have Rogue switching over to the blue side. And as we're a few minutes away from Champion Select, you have to wonder how much their strategy changes, because there was a lot of things that we saw in that draft that you heard Yamato talking about. He really loved the Talia Thresh Draven combo, but we just saw the execution not be there. So is it a situation where they try to run back something similar and just say, hey, we'll do better this time around, or do they just scrap it and go back to something maybe they've used in the past?
I think what's going to happen is that they're not going to get their hands on the Callista. I would imagine that Misfits would ban it from red side now that we know both teams can play it. I think, again, Rogue kind of gambled on what they thought was going to be a good matchup for it. Maybe they give it away and Beef was like, I'll play the other side of the matchup. I'll play the Draven. I'll show you how the dive is done. And I know that when we were doing some investigating, you found that Rogue were actually playing a lot of the Tom Kench Fasting Senna.
Yeah, we were looking into solo queue records or just earlier today, and we saw a lot of things that Vander specifically was busting out. Hansama playing the Fasting Senna, obviously Vander trying things like the Nautilus, you expect it, Set, you expect it, but he was getting really weird. He was trying things out like the Maokai, and now I wonder if they've decided it's time to unleash that, because it was banned in the previous game, but Fasting Senna, you have to imagine, does give your team a lot of power in that it frees up your support to try out some really crazy things.
And we thought that was kind of going to be the champion that the series might be built around, similar to what Fnatic were doing with the Fasting Senna. So we'll see if Rogue get their hands on it. I expect the red side bans for Misfits to be Syndra, Senna, and Callista. We'll see how close I get to that prediction here, whereas Rogue can start to target ban, and we'll see where the priority pick is going to be. If maybe it's one of these prized 80 carries that gets through, like the Aphelios that Hansama really likes to pilot, or maybe a priority jungle pick.
And I'm curious as well to see kind of how Bvoy's performance changes over the series, because as good as that game was for him, as highlight reel worthy as it was there in the early game, was a lot of other people setting him up for success, and see if the draft can kind of do something similar for him this time around. If he gets another powerful duo like the Taric Callista, or if he's kind of forced into a position where he doesn't get to take his priority pick, where he's forced into something he's less comfortable on. Obviously the Aphelios, something that we love to see him on as well, but if it's something like the MF, I'm absolutely terrified because he's 0-4 on it, and it just does not look like his champion.
And the thing is it's a name that we didn't expect to be coming out of our mouths when talking about Misfits and a victory that they took away, saying Bvoy repeatedly. And the fact of the matter is that in this elimination match, I kind of look at both these teams, Rogue and Misfits, and I didn't expect either of them to be here. I expected Rogue to be that top 4 team that we had kind of been predicting them to be this entire split. They were supposed to be the one that went to the upper half of the bracket. They were the chosen team of kind of our group of rookies to ascend to the next level, and no one expected Misfits, I think, to even make playoffs after a disastrous 2019. So while we're now moving into game 2 of this series, it feels like no one expected it to be Rogue versus Misfits, and both of these teams have had this glimpse of glory, this taste of victory. Misfits peaking up at first and second, Rogue proving that they can sit at the table with the big boys, and now they're just starved for recognition. They want to win this so they can remind everyone that, yes, it wasn't just a fluke, it wasn't a flash in the pan, we deserve to be here.
And absolutely, and that's only doubled down by the fact that both of these teams had, honestly, miserable final weeks. They were both up for 4th place. They could have made it. It might have been a miracle run for Misfits, but Rogue were in the driver's seat to take it themselves and collapsed as they got close to the finish line. But here we are now in picks and bans for Game 2. Rogue on the blue side, Misfits on the red. Misfits continuing to ban the Syndra, something we brought up last game, Frostgren. Looks like they're not ready to show us the Bvoy Syndra quite yet. And the Ezreal going to be taken away as well.
I like the Ezreal ban just because it fits in line with what I think Bvoy really was well known for, which was playing weak side. And also it frees up Dinnick. Whenever you have a champion like Ezreal or even Varus, they can hold the lane by themselves, Ezreal with his safety, Varus with his range, and then unlock Dinnick that he can roam pretty freely without having to worry about Bvoy. And again, it's the fact that Misfits are kind of like a 3-man mid team, whereas Rogue are a 3-man side team. So the bans are saying pretty consistent for Rogue, putting a target on Bvoy's back, and all I need is that Callista ban, and I'll have gotten Misfits bans red side.
Ooh, GP. They're not banning, but of course, Misfits potentially have to be nervous about giving him to Kalista as well. Hansama has played one game on it. He won the one game as well, and it's something that he has been spamming to a certain degree in solo queue, so could try his hand at it too. And I don't know if it's something that Misfits want to deal with, because B-Voy's history going up against Kalista, he was one of, I believe, Karzi's victims, just getting absolutely eviscerated in lane. And it looks like, yeah, he doesn't want, he's happy to play it, but he does not want to be the one to play against it, and that frees up the Aphelios that you were talking about, Frostgurn.
You can't see it, Dracos. I just did the victory laugh. You asked me what would be the priority pick then. I was like, pretty sure it'll be Aphelios. I think it's Inslok right there for Hansama. So not really showing a lot. A champion that both B-Voy and Hansama have showed consistency on. So, that's now 4 potential ADC picks. Now 5 with the Aphelios tonight. Like, how deep into the champion pool is B-Voy going to reach? Is he going to go for that 0-4 misfortune?
I absolutely do not want to see it any time ever again. Sadly, B-Voy has had a lot of great games. None of his misfortune games have been those games. And for now, going back to something that I think we both prefer to see him on, a lot of safety in the Xayah. Maybe not something that he can solo hold the lane on, but obviously a get-out-of-jail-free card in that ult, also with the potential to set up Denick to play Rakan, is pretty solid for Misfits. Yeah,
and Xayah Rakan, one of the few duos that can bounce a wave level 1, play hyper-aggressive on that lane state, so Misfits have taken the book, thrown it out the window, like, you have now got to play around us playing through the bot lane, because we are putting so much power into it, especially if that's an Ornn mid. If everyone's able to unlock with it, get it rotating around the map, and start playing around this Xayah and Rakan that we think we're going to see.
And continuing to see Rogue go for the blind pick Renekton here, or pseudo-blind, right, in the sense that the Ornn is a flex pick. But it looks like it's going to be pure safety is the name of the game for Rogue. You said it. Misfits are saying, we're playing around bot lane. Rogue say, okay, we respect it. We'll pick Tom Kench. we know when we're on the back foot, and we're going to accept our position in the spot side of the map.
Yeah, trying to play front to back, or at least match the front to back, as we now have some pretty big, beefy boys in Ornn and Renekton. I'm, of course, always going to favor Ornn in the beefy boy category here. But I would have liked to see the Trundle. I think whenever you flash that Trundle, you get the potential to kill one of the tanks, or at least shred them down. So I think it was Rogue weighing out, okay, we see the Ornn, do we take the potential Trundle jungle or Trundle support? There's still a possibility that you could see it come out, because it doesn't have to just be played in that support position. Maybe Inspired grabs it, and you get some sort of answer to deal with Ornn in a late game.
And the thing that I wish I could see in Rogue's draft is that confidence that Renekton was a flex pick Frostgurn, because I feel like on blue side, as many flex picks as you can get kind of balance out the red side last pick advantage. But I know what's going into the hands of Finn, but I have a lot more confidence in Misfits to flex that Ornn around to find something else that they can do with it. We now see the Jarvan band away, and I'm trying to figure out how Rogue actually round out a composition where they have a very kind of safe playing backline and a Renekton who wants to get more aggressive, who wants to go in.
I think it's about finding a really strong jungler so that they can have the superior 2v2 top side, or at least some kill pressure there. Usually Inspired does like to bounce around between Larson and Fenn and kind of set up dives there, especially when you do have something like the Renekton. I think we've seen a lot of Renekton being played in the mid lane. Like, I know that you just talked about how we expect it to be Finn's pick, but we've already seen B-Voy pull out the Callisto, so maybe Larson decides that he's going to pull a humanoid and take the Renekton into the mid lane. But that's kind of my expectation there. Is there's the Trundle ban away, so they're not going to make sure that Inspired gets it and can put kind of a target on this Ornn's back. And now it's about grabbing a safe blind pick and something that can flex to try to match whatever matchup Misfits want.
Ooh, taking their time here.
That makes a lot more sense. Forget everything that I just said. Just pick your jungler here.
Yeah, definitely true. Saving last pick for jungle, maybe not the most inspiring counter pick options up and available.
Forgot that there was an Ornn. It happens.
I mean, look.
I try to block it out.
Not necessarily the most thrilling champion to watch up until, at least until he started to use his ultimate. But it looks like Inspired is happy to take Sejuani into Lee Sin. Fine matchup
it's gonna
for
be
Sejuani.
Zoe.
Ooh.
He's gonna pick Azir, and then everyone's gonna take Zoe, and then it's gonna be boring.
Aw, Frosco, you sound so disappointed. You don't love the thrilling Azir versus Zoe matchup where Azir maybe accidentally gets tagged by a bubble, dashes away to safety, and then nothing happens. That's not what does it for you. That's not what gets you fired up.
Come on, Fivvin. Give me something good. I know you can take Zoe here, but do you want to? It's Lee Sin. You could take something spicy.
I would love sustained damage. Even better. You wanted boring, Frosco, and Misfits are like, we will deliver. Corky versus Zir.
I wish I had Zoe now. I take it all back.
What I will say is that I like that they have more sustained damage on the team. Zoe's a lot of burst. Obviously, you get a lot of good pick comps, but now it feels like both teams can, in theory, front-to-back team fight. But yeah, definitely not the most exciting lane phase.
I think it's also the potential now that Misfits can play out into a side lane with the Corki, which is something that Rogue's composition will be reliant on the Abyssal Voyage to match, so there's a bit more opportunity and flexibility there in terms of how Misfits want to play this one out. But otherwise, these are really stock standard compositions. I feel like we went back in time. It's Azir versus Corki. It's like your big, beefy tanks and then fighting front to back with Aphelios versus Xayah. This is not my favorite compositions, I'll say that.
Which, to be fair, if you're Rogue right now, you're like, hell yeah, we just got our bread and butter. Larson on Azir scaling to late game, that's all we did last summer. So, ready to see them bust it out again. And for Finn, I think finally has potentially a positive matchup here on the top side of the map with the Blade of the Rune King buffs. Renekton can really bully out the Ornn, even if it's pretty hard to outvalue him in fights.
Yeah, and it's just kind of different responsibilities here for both these top laners. Dan's going to be on weak side tank utility duty, whereas there is a bit more bite for Finn here.
And really, when we look at it, if the mid lanes aren't going crazy, if they're not fighting, if they're not killing each other, it gives us a lot more room once again to focus around the bot side of the map and see if Misfits didn't really out-execute last game. They kind of just caught what Rogue were throwing at them. Maybe they can be the ones to dictate the pace more over this game. But here we go. Rogue versus Misfits, Game 2. Misfits up 1-0 in this elimination match. And here we are, straight on to the Rift, ready to see what exactly both teams have in store here in this early game, Frostgrave. Because I think
not going to be much.
It's going to be calm. It's going to be controlled. It's going to be collected. All right, that's perfect, actually, because it gives us kind of time to talk more about what you brought up in Champ Selects, which I think is so interesting, which is that concept of kind of like fighting to taste victory again, right? Because I think that for Rogue and Misfits, these are two hugely storied organizations. Rogue actually relatively new. Misfits hugely storied here, and they're like on the cusp of greatness, but they just can't keep it going consistently.
It's also the fact that, and we talked about this, outside of Vander and Febivin, you have a bunch of very young, inexperienced names. Some of these guys kind of getting their first shot at making a splash in playoffs. And, in a league that is so storied with some of the most iconic players in League of Legends, the Recklesses and the Perks of the world, you can only take what opportunity is given to you. And for a lot of these guys, it's their first opportunity to make a name for themselves. Kind of the theme of this series is remember the name. You will not forget B-Boy again, and he will make sure that he makes this impact. And now it's on Rogue side. Who are you going to remember? Who will actually make the rise and show up when they need to be clutch?
It's a huge question, right? And doing it 2 games in a row on 2 different champions who can be very explosive in the game. The Callista as well as potentially here the Xayah on the bottom side is a big deal. But you talk about veterans in this game, and I think it's important to bring up the one man who is like truly a veteran beyond veterans outside of Vander, and that is Febivin in the mid lane. He historically is just a guy that has gone through so much in his career.